So I'm here today with my good friend and cousin, Father Andrew Brinkman. And I've had a number of parishioners asking me, Father, are you going to say anything about the elections? And the answer is yes. So I'm gonna talk about the elections. If you care to hear it, stay tuned.
So just real quick, the real thing that's been troubling me is to know whether or not someone can vote for Joe Biden and still go to heaven.
Well, I think that's a good question, and even the good thief on the cross went to heaven. So I'm not gonna get quite into that.
Well, what are you gonna tell me about voting in Tuesday?
Well, I mean, I'll ask you this question: if I vote for Trump, do I automatically go to heaven?
I can tell you that is not necessarily the case.
Okay, all right. So we see this is a little bit more complicated than we sometimes get, and these are sometimes the types of things that are floating around there. And I've mentioned a couple times in parish columns and things like, "Hey, look, let's stop the infighting. Is the election important? Yeah, the election is important. Is it the most important thing in the world?
No, I can tell you that it's not.
Okay, is Joe Biden going to save us?
No.
Okay, is Donald Trump the Messiah?
Well, that's Jesus.
Okay, is America the chosen instrument for the salvation of the human race?
We'll have to talk later.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is complicated, but I think where I want to start, where I don't hear a lot of other people starting, is way back. So what does the church have to say about humanity, about politics? How does politics even fit in? So maybe one question to start with is, what came first, politics or man? Why do we have politics?
Well, I think politics is at the service of man.
Right. So what man can't do on his own, he has the family. So we can think, let's go way back, like, okay, I can't do this farm thing on my own, so I have a family. When I have a family, I can do the farm thing. But then I need more than just a family. I need a tribe, a colony. I need more and more. And once there's a big enough group of people, we say, okay, well, what is that? A society. And once we get to that point, we need some sort of governance. We need some way to maintain order, to keep all these people sort of in the same place.
Right, to establish that this is your piece of property and not his, and I'm not free to take your property at will.
Right. So and so I think that's what government does, is it can establish an economy. It can protect the people.
Protects borders.
Protects the borders. So those are the types of things. But things like religion, what does the state have to say about that?
It's out of its purview, actually.
Right. What does the state have to say about education?
First, it belongs to the parents.
Right. So a state to step in and say, this is how you will educate your children, is actually overstepping its bounds. It might set up parameters that can help us educate, but it doesn't take over.
There's an important word that you haven't said, but you have alluded to it. Could you say something real quickly about subsidiarity?
Subsidiarity. So to do at the lowest level what can be done at the lowest level, and only move up as is necessary.
So you're saying that a mom and a dad who spend the majority of time with their child are probably the best to teach their child?
Right.
Okay.
Right. And if they aren't able, they say, well, I don't have the education, I need somebody to help me. Then you might branch out into, like we see this today with a homeschool community or something. And like, hey, here, we'll help in this process. And then, even wider parochial schools. This is how they popped up, in our country 100 years ago. The bishops saying, hey, we need to really ensure the education and the moral formation of our youth, and really encourage / mandated parochial schools in every parish. Now, I think this is a good segue into what does the state understand about man? Does the state know man better than the church knows man?
The short answer is no.
What's missing from the state's understanding of humanity?
God.
Right. So when we talk about the separation of church and state, we're not saying that the church can't speak into the life of the state.
No, that was actually contrary even to the great Martin Luther King from Birmingham jail. He says, right, the church doesn't dictate to the state, but the church forms the state's conscience.
Right. So what's missing from the state then is the understanding that every individual man is created by a God who loves him and knows him and has a plan for him, and then that plan includes a temporal, earthly existence and happiness, but also a supernatural destiny. So that's something that's completely outside of the purview of the state. The state can help us on this earth and put things in place in such a way that I can pursue happiness and comfortability, and I'm not so poor that I'm scrapping for food and I don't have time to worship or have family life, but it can't actually get me to heaven.
Right.
And that's not in its ability.
Something to mention right now is that the founding fathers, as they were creating the United States of America, were consulted by the Holy Father asking who they thought ought to be the first bishop in America, and they responded to the Holy Father, that's actually beyond our purview. We shouldn't be making decisions on who the next bishop is. We're trying to run a society. We're trying to get our government established. Questions of ecclesial things, it's beyond us. Similarly, the state has to recognize that questions of man's ultimate destiny, it's beyond his pay grade, as it were.
Right. So I think all that's helpful because for the Christian, for the Catholic, fundamentally what that means is I see the world differently than the atheist, than the secular humanist, than the agnostic. I see it imbued with a God who loves us, who's holding everything in existence and has a plan for us. And that plan isn't this arbitrary sort of like, hey, do these things and I'll let you into heaven. It's actually the plan of the maker who wants this thing called me, called a man, a human being, to run really well. It's interesting, right? So there's two types of laws when we think of like our car, okay? So there's one law from the maker that says, hey, don't put Coca-Cola in your gas tank. Have you ever violated that law?
Not even thought about it.
All right. And then there's this other law that says you shall drive this speed limit and no faster. And that's given to us by the outside, the state, the governing body. Have you ever broken that law?
On a regular basis.
Right. And this is kind of typical. We'll break a law that if nobody's looking, I might break this law that's not going to affect the thing. But when the maker says, hey, use this thing in this way, I'm gonna follow that. That's where we sometimes get confused, is the laws that God gives us as humans, and we see these in the Ten Commandments, and the church extrapolates these for us, and they're written into actually our body and our soul, and the very natural law, we call it. And that actually helps us to run well. We can violate those, but in the end, we are actually the ones who suffer from it. We're the ones who get broken because of it.
Yeah. I'll just remind everybody that he did put Coke in his gas tank.
I never put Coca-Cola in my gas tank. I mean that one time, but it didn't go well. It didn't go well. So that's the Catholic perspective. So to divorce my faith from my politics, to say, okay, well, I'm not going to let that affect my politics, is incongruous. It's actually split mind. I can't. I don't understand either man or politics or both or God if I'm saying something like that.
It almost seems that you're putting politics even before your relationship with God.
Right. Yeah. So God affects everything. Now that doesn't mean I go as a politician. I would say, okay, now everybody must worship in this way. No, we still have freedom of worship. We have freedom of conscience. We have to choose those things ourselves. But as a Catholic who's invested in the civil order, we say, well, I want laws that help me to be the best man, the best human person I can possibly be, and that would include certain things like freedom of worship, freedom of conscience. It would include things like laws against things we find completely immoral, like euthanasia, abortion, those sorts of things. So I think that might be a good segue into some of those hot topics that come up a lot during election time. And one as we get in there, the church has always said, like we say, so the project of parish priests, one of our responsibilities is to help form consciences. We always hear that, vote your conscience, follow your conscience. Well, Father Andrew, is conscience the same thing as preference?
Well, I mean, I have a preference of a dark roast over a light roast, so I don't think so.
I don't think conscience weighs in there.
I think on a basic level, what the conscience is saying is, do this, don't do that. It's written into our very being. It's sometimes often a visceral effect in our gut. Basically, it just says, do this, don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's not just whatever comes to my mind. I actually have to form my thoughts. I have to form my feelings based on what is objectively true.
Right. So actually, oftentimes, our conscience goes against our preferences. I would prefer to punch this guy in the face because he's making me angry. My conscience says, no, you can't do that. Actually, I would prefer to have sexual relations with every beautiful woman that I see. Conscience says, no, you can only have sexual relations with your wife. I would prefer to be really rich, and my conscience says, well, you can't cheat, you can't lie, you can't rob that bank. So it's going against what I prefer. So preferences, that's actually a bodily, visceral reaction based on things we've experienced and desires that we have. That's not conscience.
No, conscience is actually choosing based on what I know to be true. And St. Paul says very clearly in his letter to the Romans that there is a law written within the fabric of creation, which by observing it, now I don't pretend that it's easy, but by observing and investigating into creation, I can actually have knowledge of this law and I can pattern my life according to it. You can't take the life of an innocent.
Right.
Now, some people would like to say, okay, there are certain circumstances, but no, you can't take the life of an innocent. Now, that's not saying that one can't take a life. There are certain circumstances in which taking the life of another, either be it war, self-defense, these are moments in which, okay, the life of another can be taken. But to take the life of an innocent, that's just not up for us.
Right. Yeah. So it's a lot more complicated sometimes, but also a lot more simple sometimes than we make it out to be. Now, as we get into this kind of topic, and this is kind of the contentious part of everything going on during a political year or any time you have a conversation with anybody. What is I think it's important to talk about our cooperation with a grave evil. So one Catholic principle, Christian principle, we can never do evil in order that a good may come out of it. So we can't lie or steal or kill in order that something else good may happen. We're not utilitarians. We aren't saying, okay, well, what's the best for the whole? If we kill off this population of people, then these people are better off. I mean, this gets us in a really dangerous territory. That was the theme of one of the recent Avengers movies, that the bad guy, he's got this heart for humanity. He says, you know what, the globe can't support all of these people anymore, and we need to kill off one half of them. Mm-hmm. And he devises this way to kill them off totally painless. They just disappear into dust. You can't do that. You can't do that. We don't look at the whole and say, well, for the whole, we'll do something bad here. No, we have to consider every single human being in the way that God considers that human being.
Well, what about the more complicated issue of there are certain things that I like in this politician, and there are some certain things that I don't like.
Mm-hmm.
How do I balance the difficulty of accepting an imperfect system? We have a two-party system. There's no possible way that both of those parties are going to articulate every nuance that there could possibly be. A lot of these things are left up for prudential judgment. Like here in the fine state of Michigan, we have to pay 10 cents every time we buy a carbonated beverage. In Minnesota, that's not the case. That's a prudential judgment. But
Right. And a lot of those things, economics, foreign policy, these are all important things, and one side isn't completely right and one side isn't completely wrong. I personally don't have a mind for economics. I don't understand foreign trade. So I leave it to those people who do understand it. And some people are really passionate and study those sorts of things and understand those sorts of things. And they might say, well, this is the better way. Well, I think this is the better way. We kind of, our political situation in America gets so polemical that we make it sound like whoever you're talking to, that the devil is on this side and Jesus Christ is on this side. And if that were truly the case, well, for Catholics, it would be so easy to vote, right? Well, this guy is pure goodness and this guy is pure evil. Well, that's rarely, if ever, the situation. We're voting for two imperfect human beings because this is the other situation that we as Catholics say, you know what? We're never going to have the perfect system. We're never going to have the perfect country because we're all fallen human beings. We all have original sin. Our presidents, our senators, and every single human being in the country. And so there's no perfect system because we're making that system out of imperfect beings. You can't make a good omelet with bad eggs, is what they say.
Yeah, in the same way that one would never try to cure cancer with a Band-Aid. And this is the real difficulty for our current situation. That is, we have lost the vision of God, as you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, and we've lost the reality that man is fallen. And unless we have this deeply in the front of our minds, unless we have this in the front of our political activity, our work, everything that we do, we're going to try to cure lung cancer with a Band-Aid. And it's just not going to work. But that's what we're trying to do in our current political context. Mm-hmm. We think that we can solve deep, deep issues like hatred in man's heart. Another one that's going on a lot is inequality. We think that we can just solve these if we get the right political person, or we pass this law, or we get this judge, or whatever it is. But these problems are deeply rooted in the human heart.
Right.
And the only way to solve them is Jesus. It's being saved by Jesus.
Right. Yeah. A political party is not going to cure racism. It's not going to cure poverty. It's not going to cure nothing. We can't do those things. So getting back to individual politicians, so candidates, So let's just say it right. So is Joe Biden a stand-up worthy Catholic?
No.
No. I mean, he's supporting full out. He says Roe v. Wade will be I'll make it the law of the land. He presided over a gay marriage. These are things that are antithetical to Catholic values. He's not living the life of a Catholic. I don't know what his conscience is. I don't know where he's at with the Lord Jesus. I don't know what his prayer time is like. But those outward things that he's done and said are not in line with the church. Does that in itself mean that I can or can't vote for him?
In itself, no. But to be able to answer that question properly, we would have to see what the other politician is offering that would outweigh what it is Joe Biden is proposing. For example, let's just take the question of the death penalty and abortion, which is one that we often hear. And as of late, we've been encouraged by the Holy Fathers not to support the death penalty. Archbishop Gomez has recently spoken disfavorably of the death penalty. Okay, so let's just say one party is saying we're going to do away with the death penalty, and another party is saying, but they're also saying we're going to continue abortion.
And as a good Catholic, you're like, well, I can't really support either of those things. If I vote for them, I'm supporting death penalty, and if I vote for them, I'm supporting abortion. What am I to do?
Do you know how many people died through the death penalty this past year?
How many?
Less than 100. Less than 50.
Okay. And what if every single one of those was innocent? It was just bad lawyers and corrupt systems.
First, I would say that needs to be addressed in itself. And that's very tragic that the system did not serve them.
But even if they were all innocent, how many innocent human beings were killed in the womb in the last year?
Close to 1 million.
Yeah, I mean, some statistics are 10,000 every Saturday in America, upwards of 800,000 over the years. So one of the things that the bishops talk about is proportionality. Okay, not whether we're weighing human lives, but proportionality, 800,000 to less than 50 is not even close. Now I don't want to, we mentioned Joe Biden as an individual, as a human being. On the other side, you say, well, is Donald Trump the kind of guy that you want your kids, your sons to emulate? You say, I want you to be like Donald Trump.
No.
Why?
Well, because he's a narcissist.
There's that.
He's not charitable toward his opponents. He doesn't have a good track record on his own marriage fidelity. There's plenty of things to say that he's not a gentleman in any sense of the term.
So based on, looking at two presidential candidates and saying just based on human beings or their moral standing, that's not what we're voting for them for. We're not voting for the guy that, we think is a more decent chap.
We're voting for the policies which he is going to support, the kind of judges which he will appoint, the laws which he might veto, the support that he gives to different countries in terms of the head of state. These are aside from personality, what we're really looking at are issues.
Right. And not just the individuals, but the party that they represent and support and collaborate with, and what those parties stand for. So as a Catholic, we would look for not the Catholic party, but at least the party that allows us to continue to live as a Catholic, that has a better vision of what man is, allows us to pursue our eternal destiny, those sorts of things that keeps God in the public square. I mean, I think this is important. There is a faction that is trying to remove God even from the national anthem or from the Pledge of Allegiance, right? That's really a really dangerous place for our country to go.
Because as soon as the country forgets that God, and not even necessarily Jesus Christ, God, the source of what it is that we have, our very being, as soon as we forget that, who's to ensure any law that we have? Who's to ensure that there is equality among peoples? Because, well, as soon as you take God out of the picture, there's no fair judge.
Right. What's the basis of our equality? That's one of those words we hear a lot. Equality. We're all equal. Okay. Mr. Atheist, person who doesn't believe in God, that this is the communist problem, equality. Well, but what's your equality based on? What's your equality? Because you know what? I look around the world and I see a lot of inequality. I look at you and you're a lot taller than me. We're unequal in that. You're taller than me.
It's true.
I see people who are smarter than me. I see people who are richer than me. I see people who are holier than me. There's a lot of equality and inequality, and just based on appearances. So what's the equality based on?
That we were all made in the image and likeness of God. That we were all made by a personal God, a creator who has made us for himself. We all have that advantage. We're all sinners, and we're all called to the same thing. We're all called to the fullest human life on this planet and eternal life in Christ. Now, that second part is not so much what we're voting upon right now, but the first principle is that we're all created by God. We're all created with freedom. We're all created with an intelligence. That can be accepted even by a non-Christian. This is what ensures our equality.
Right. But we take God out of the picture, and what's our equality based on?
Well, it's more tenuous at that point. Perhaps the particular philosophy that's guiding a people, money, power, good looks.
Right. I mean, take God out of the equation, and how is man even different from the animals?
He's not. And a lot of environmentalists will make this very same argument that, well, there's no God. Because there's no God, we're just one species on this planet among many other species. And look, we just happen to consume at unhealthily, unsustainable rates.
Yeah, so here's an important principle for Catholics. Jesus has already promised us that this world is not going to last forever. Do we want to take care of it? Yeah, because we don't know how long it's going to last, and we want to take care of it because other people have to live in it. But it's not going to last forever. And here's another really important principle. Which is greater, this earth or one individual human soul?
I'll let you answer.
So those are the things that as Christians, that's our worldview. A worldview that sees this earth as all there is, and we have to make it as good as we possibly can and eliminate all human suffering at all costs, is going to run amok. Human suffering is bad. If that's the worst thing, if that's the worst possible thing, then euthanasia becomes legitimate because, well, we're ending human suffering. Whereas in the Christian mind, we say, well, actually, if suffering exists and God himself became man and suffered for us and has said that you can make up for the lack of the suffering in Christ, then our suffering has merit and it has eternal possibilities. Is it something to be avoided? Yeah, we want to help people so that they don't suffer, but when they suffer and they suffer well, it actually can be very meritorious. Again, the world doesn't have an answer for that.
Yeah, and I think I'm so grateful for our conversation, Father. I feel like we've gotten a little bit sidetracked on what we were really originally talking about. Could we return just to the question, and I say that with great respect. Certainly all of these things are applicable to the political life, and it's exactly what we do need at this time. The bigger vision of how it is that we see reality and how politics, important, is just one part of that. That's so crucial. It's just one part of it. And we have to accept that we're going to live in a world with imperfect politicians, their personal characters, no doubt. But what's really important is that we, as Catholics, who have our own part, a vision toward eternal life, but also concerned about this life here and now, that we would vote according to the natural law in our conscience. And what Father was saying, you were saying, is that not all the issues are on equal footing. And that there are certain things which are always and everywhere wrong. And so the question is, can I vote for somebody who is actively promoting abortion?
Right. Because so if I vote for that person because they are actively promoting abortion, I say, well, I think that's a good thing. Well, here's a problem with my conscience. My conscience is malformed, or I'm going against it, or I don't know the numbers, or there's something. But if I'm cooperating with that in a formal way, say, yes, I too agree with that, then that you would be morally culpable for that. If I found other reasons and said, okay, well, this person, yeah, he supports this, but there's other reasons why I think I can vote for him.
The question then becomes, do those other reasons outweigh, for example, the 800,000 babies that were aborted this year?
Right. And that would be the question. So if on one side you have a pro-abortion candidate, and on the other side you have, a pro, we're going to kill everybody who's above 6 feet tall. He's 6'6". Then you have something like, okay, well, I don't know about this. If I have an abortion person on one side and somebody who says, I'm making everybody has to become Muslim. Okay, well, now we have an interesting dilemma here. But if it really the proportionality, the significance, it can't be. Here's one that comes up, right? The immigration policies and things like this. I had somebody ask me, Father, why do you never preach on immigration? Well, because immigration has so many variables in it. I'm not at the border. I don't know what's going on. What I do know is that people have the right, this is what the church teaches, people have the right to migrate, but countries also have the right and obligation to ensure safe borders. So it's not an unmitigated right. It doesn't mean that anybody who wants to come into any other country gets to do that willy-nilly. The government has the purview to say, okay, well, this is what's safe for us. This is what's sustainable for us. This is what's right in this climate, this time. And I don't know all those factors. So that's not high up on my list. Now, what the church would also say is, like, once those immigrants are here, I have to love them. I have to love every single one of my neighbors. But one of those I can affect, and one of those I can't do much about. I can love the people I see around me. I can't go to the border and open the door or shut the door on my own.
Right. And we also have to consider that one can remain a good Catholic and have a differing viewpoint from another good Catholic about immigration. There's a certain freedom that the church allows us on questions like this. Do we allow 5,000 people into the country or 50,000 into the country on a year?
Right.
Well, that's up for debate, and the church is going to say, okay, well, here are some principles that can inform your decision, but it's actually not the church's position to say, okay, 50 or 5.
Right. So, I think that's a lot. We've presented a lot. I think one final thing that I think is important to note. Sometimes we get this to Catholic must vote for one of the two presidential candidates. Is that fact?
No. But what the church can say is that there are certain ones that we cannot support. It's not saying who that we have to support. And I think a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, that's a two-party system. It's like, no, it's important. You can't do this. I'm not telling you what you have to do. The law in its very basic form is going to say, you can't kill the innocent. But the law isn't going to say, this is what it means to live a fully human life.
Mm-hmm.
And what the church is saying is, okay, there are certain things we obviously cannot support, intrinsically evil behavior. But the church is going to say, there are other ways, there are different people who can support the good that might be on a whole variety of positions on the scale. It's subtle, but it's really important to maintain.
Right, exactly. So to cast a vote for, or to write in a candidate to vote for a third party, although I don't really recommend voting for the legalized cannabis now party, would that be morally acceptable? No,
that would not be.
Okay, well, they're out.
If you voted for the legalized skateboarding now, I could get on board.
Yeah, that could be good. So we see an area where, like, okay, I can't vote in good conscience for this party, and maybe in my mind I just can't get on board with voting for this particular person or both parties. I think both parties are corrupt or fail in some way, and I can vote off suit, so to say.
Yeah,
it's a morally acceptable choice. I'll leave you. We'll sign off with this. As priests, oftentimes after elections, people come in and say, they confess having voted for whomever. If you know you're voting for somebody you're going to have to confess for, don't vote for them. That's presumption on the mercy of God, and that's one of the worst sins that we can commit. Actually, is to presume on the Lord's mercy, to commit a sin, knowingly commit a sin beforehand, saying, I'll go to confession for that, no big deal. So, any final thoughts, Father Andrew?
It's been a pleasure to be with you, and God bless you, St. Maximilian Kolbe.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I know this is a deep, complicated topic, and if you have any serious, legitimate questions, I'm always happy to talk about those. But I'd ask that this not turn into some sort of debate in the comment column. I'm just proclaiming church teaching. I'm not giving you my own personal opinion.